My name is Maya, and at 28 years old, I learned that blood means nothing when you're lying face down in the dirt with your heart racing like a freight train. The steel beam had caught me across the shoulder, sending me sprawling onto the construction site's gravel. My heart had skittered away as pain shot through my chest like lightning. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The world tilted sideways as voices shouted around me, but they sounded like they were coming from underwater. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Someone was calling 911. I heard fragments through the haze. Female, 28, possible cardiac episode, construction accident at Riverside Plaza. The EMT's voice was professional, calm, asking for emergency contacts. They found my phone, scrolled to the name marked Mom, and dialed. I was conscious enough to hear them explain the situation, hear them say I was being transported to Sacred Heart Medical Center, that I needed family there immediately. And then I heard something that cut deeper than any steel beam ever could. The line went dead. They hung up. The paramedic looked confused. Tried again. This time, my father picked up. Same explanation, same urgent request for family support, same result. Click. Silence. Like I was some stranger asking for money instead of their daughter fighting to stay conscious on a stretcher. The ambulance ride blurred past in sirens and fluorescent lights, but one voice cut through everything else. It was deep, weathered, and absolutely furious. "This is Marcus Chen, site foreman at Riverside Plaza. That's my worker you've got there, and I'm meeting you at the hospital. Don't you dare let anything happen to her." I wanted to cry, but my chest felt like it was wrapped in barbed wire. Marcus had been my supervisor for 3 years, the one who taught me how to read blueprints when the other guys said women didn't belong in construction. He was the one who made sure I got overtime pay when the company tried to short me. And now, he was the one racing to a hospital while my own parents couldn't be bothered to stay on the phone. The ambulance room was a chaos of beeping machines and concerned faces. Nurses moved around me with practiced efficiency, attaching monitors, drawing blood, asking questions I could barely answer through the oxygen mask. The doctor, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, explained that my heart had gone into an irregular rhythm, possibly triggered by the impact and stress. They were running tests, keeping me for observation, but I was going to be okay. That's when Marcus appeared in the doorway, still wearing his work boots and safety vest, his weathered face creased with worry. He looked so out of place among the sterile hospital equipment, but he didn't seem to care. He pulled up a chair next to my bed and sat down like he was settling in for the long haul. "How you feeling, kiddo?" he asked, using the nickname that had annoyed me when I first started, but now felt like a warm blanket. I tried to speak, but my throat was raw. He held up a hand. "Don't strain yourself. I called your parents again on the way over. Thought maybe there was some misunderstanding." My stomach dropped. Even through the medication fog, I could see the anger flickering behind his eyes. "Your mother told me," and I quote, "that they were busy with your brother's engagement party planning and couldn't be disturbed. Said you were probably just looking for attention anyway, since you've always been dramatic about getting hurt." The heart monitor beside me started beeping faster. Marcus glanced at it, then back at me, his expression softening. That's when I knew something was real wrong with this picture. In 3 years, I've seen you work through a sprained wrist, a concussion from a falling wrench, and that time you got food poisoning but still showed up because we were behind schedule. Dramatic isn't a word I'd use to describe Maya Rodriguez. He leaned back in the chair, crossing his arms. "So I did what any decent human being would do. I called your brother directly." My eyes widened. I hadn't spoken to Danny in months, not since the last family gathering where I'd been treated like the black sheep who couldn't get her life together. He was the golden child, the one with the engineering degree and the perfect fiancé, while I was just the sister who swung hammers for a living. "Interesting conversation," Marcus continued, his voice taking on that edge he used when dealing with difficult subcontractors. Turns out Danny didn't even know you've been in an accident. When I told him his sister was in the ER after a workplace injury, he seemed genuinely shocked that nobody had called him. Said he'd been trying to reach you for weeks, but figured you were just being stubborn. The pieces started clicking together in my medicated brain, forming a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. Then I asked him about this engagement party that was so important your parents couldn't come to the hospital. You know what he said, Maya? Marcus paused, studying my face. He said the party was next month, not today, next month, and that he'd specifically asked them to invite you, but they said you were too busy with work to care about family events. The heart monitor beside me was beeping steadily now, but it wasn't from medical distress. It was from anger, pure and simple, cutting through the pain medication like a blade. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. I recorded that call, by the way. Figured you might need to hear it later when you're feeling stronger. But Maya, I need you to know something right now while it's just us here. Heeling forward, his voice dropping to that serious tone he used during safety meetings. I've been in construction for 32 years. I've seen a lot of workers come and go, dealt with a lot of families during emergencies, and I have never, in all those years, seen parents who couldn't be bothered to show up when their child was hurt. That's not normal. That's not right. And it's sure as hell not your fault. The nurse came in to check my vitals, and Marcus stepped back respectfully, but he didn't leave. He stood by the window, looking out at the city lights, and I could see his reflection in the glass. His jaw was set in that way that meant he was thinking hard, planning something. When we were alone again, he turned back to me. I made a few other calls while you were getting settled in here. One to my wife, Rosa, asking her to bring you some clothes and toiletries for tomorrow. One to the union rep, making sure your medical leave is properly documented and that the company covers every cent of this hospital stay. And one to my lawyer. That last part made me sit up straighter, despite the lingering chest pain. See, Maya, there's something about your accident today that's been bothering me. That beam didn't fall on its own. I've been doing this long enough to know when equipment failure smells fishy. And when I went back to examine the site after the ambulance left, I found some interesting things. He pulled out his phone again, scrolling through photos. The safety cables on that beam were cut. Not worn, not snapped under pressure. Cut. Clean edges, like someone used bolt cutters. And the work schedule had you assigned to that exact section, even though it wasn't your normal rotation. My blood ran cold, despite the warm hospital blankets. What are you saying? I'm saying someone wanted you hurt, Maya, and I'm going to find out who.
The next morning brought clarity, along with the breakfast tray I couldn't stomach. Marcus had stayed the entire night, dozing in that uncomfortable chair, waking up every time a nurse came in to check on me. His wife, Rosa, arrived at dawn with a duffel bag full of comfortable clothes and the kind of homemade soup that actually heals people. Mijo told me what happened, she said, smoothing my hair back with gentle hands that reminded me what maternal care was supposed to feel like. Those people who call themselves your parents should be ashamed. But don't you worry, you're family to us now, whether they like it or not. Marcus was on his phone again, pacing the small room like a caged animal. I caught fragments of his conversation with someone from the company's safety department. Words like negligence and investigation and lawsuit floated through the air. When he hung up, his expression was grim. Maya, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Has anyone at the site been giving you trouble lately? Any conflicts, any complaints? Anyone who might want to see you gone? I shifted uncomfortably in the hospital bed. The question opened up a can of worms I'd been trying to keep sealed for months. There's been some tension with the new site supervisor, Rick Paulson. He started about 6 months ago, and he's made it pretty clear he doesn't think women belong in construction. Marcus nodded grimly. What kind of tension? Small things at first. Scheduling me for the worst shifts, assigning me to work alone on jobs that clearly needed 2 people, questioning my work in front of clients. Last month, he wrote me up for being late when I was actually early, said I was lying about my time cards. Did you report any of this? I looked away, embarrassed. I tried talking to HR, but Rick's cousin works there. They said it was probably just miscommunication, that I should try to be more understanding of different management styles. Marcus's jaw tightened. What else? The words came harder now. 2 weeks ago, he cornered me in the tool shed, said the company was looking to downsize and that troublemakers would be the first to go. Said maybe I'd be happier in a job more suited to my abilities, like receptionist work or something in retail. Did anyone witness this? No, he made sure we were alone. But Marcus, there's something else. Yesterday morning, before the accident, I overheard Rick talking to someone on his phone. He was standing by the equipment trailer and I was getting supplies from the storage container nearby. He didn't see me. Marcus stopped pacing. What did you hear? He was saying something about how the problem would be resolved by end of day, that I wouldn't be causing any more issues for the project timeline. He mentioned something about insurance covering workplace accidents and how nobody would question a safety incident with someone who had a history of complaints. The room went dead silent. Rosa had stopped unpacking the bag and was staring at me with wide eyes. Marcus looked like he was calculating something dangerous in his head. Maya, did Rick know about your family situation? About your parents? The question hit me like a punch to the stomach. Yeah, actually. During my performance review last month, he asked about my emergency contacts, said it was standard procedure to make sure the company had current information. I told him my parents and I weren't close, that they probably wouldn't be much help in an emergency. Marcus pulled out his phone and started scrolling through his contacts. I'm calling Detective Sarah Morales. She's handled workplace violence cases before, and she owes me a favor from when her husband got hurt on a job site 3 years ago. While Marcus made the call, Rosa sat on the edge of my bed and took my hand. Mija, I know this is scary, but you need to understand something. What happened to you wasn't just an accident, and it wasn't just workplace harassment. Someone tried to seriously hurt you, and they counted on you being alone and vulnerable when it happened. The weight of her words settled over me like a heavy blanket. Rick had engineered the perfect crime. Isolate the target, create the accident, and make sure nobody would come running when she got hurt. If he'd succeeded, I would have been just another workplace fatality statistic, easily explained away as operator error or equipment failure. But he'd miscalculated one crucial thing. He didn't know about Marcus Chen. Detective Morales arrived within an hour, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who took detailed notes and asked pointed questions. She recorded my statement about the overheard phone call, Rick's behavior, and the pattern of harassment. She also took photos of my injuries and requested copies of all my medical records from the accident. This is enough for me to open an investigation, she said, closing her notebook. But Maya, I need you to understand that we're going to need more evidence to make charges stick. Are you willing to help us gather that evidence? I looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. What would that involve? First, we're going to examine that beam and the entire accident site with the forensics team. If someone deliberately caused this accident, we'll find proof. Second, we're going to need access to Rick's phone records, work emails, and financial information to see if he had any motive beyond just wanting you gone. Marcus cleared his throat. Detective, there's something else you should know. Maya's accident happened right before a big safety audit that could have shut down the entire project if any major violations were found. Rick's been under pressure from the main office to keep things running smoothly. And Maya had been documenting safety violations, Rosa added quietly. I looked at her in surprise. Marcus told me about the reports you've been filing, Mija, the ones that Rick kept dismissing. The detective raised an eyebrow. What kind of violations? I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Improper equipment storage, insufficient safety briefings for new workers, shortcuts on structural inspections. I've been keeping detailed records because I was worried someone was going to get seriously hurt. Where are these records now? On my laptop at home, and I email copies to myself as backup. Rick doesn't know about them. The detective smiled for the first time since she had arrived. Maya, you may have just handed us this case. If Rick sabotaged that beam to silence you and prevent those violations from being discovered during the audit, that's attempted murder and obstruction of justice. Marcus stood up, his expression shifting into the commanding presence I'd seen him use when dealing with difficult clients. Detective, what do you need from us to make this stick? I need Maya to go home, act normal, and document everything Rick does or says for the next few days. I need access to those safety reports, and I need you, Marcus, to help me understand exactly how that beam should have been secured and how it could have been sabotaged. She turned back to me. But most importantly, Maya, I need you to understand that you're not safe as long as Rick thinks he got away with this. He's going to be watching to see if you suspect anything. Can you handle that? The question hung in the air. 24 hours ago, I was just a construction worker whose parents didn't care enough to visit me in the hospital. Now I was potentially the key witness in an attempted murder case. The old Maya might have been scared, might have backed down, might have looked for a way to avoid confrontation. But the old Maya hadn't spent a night in the hospital listening to Marcus Chen make phone calls on her behalf while her own family couldn't be bothered to return a text message.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
The old Maya hadn't realized that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when you need them most. I looked at Marcus, who had dark circles under his eyes from staying awake all night to make sure I was okay. I looked at Rosa, who had brought me soup and clean clothes without being asked. I thought about Rick Paulson, who had tried to eliminate me like I was nothing more than a problem to be solved. "Detective," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "What exactly do you need me to do?" Walking back onto the construction site 3 days later felt like entering a different world. The same steel beams reached toward the sky, the same concrete mixers rumbled in the distance, but everything had changed. Rick Paulson was waiting by the main trailer, clipboard in hand, wearing that fake concerned expression he'd perfected over the past 6 months. "Maya, good to see you back on your feet," he said, voice dripping with false sympathy. "Terrible accident. We've all been so worried about you." I forced a smile, remembering Detective Morales' instructions to act normal. "Thanks, Rick. Still a bit sore, but the doctor cleared me for light duty." Of course. We want to ease you back in slowly. Why don't you start with inventory work in the supply shed? Nice and safe, no heavy machinery involved." The supply shed. The same isolated location where he'd cornered me 2 weeks ago, where no one would witness whatever he planned to say or do next. I nodded agreeably, even as my heart hammered against my ribs. "That sounds perfect. I appreciate you looking out for me." His smile widened, and I caught something predatory flickering behind his eyes. "Just doing my job. We're all family here, right?" Family. The word tasted bitter coming from his mouth, especially after spending the past 3 days learning what real family actually looked like. Marcus had checked on me every few hours, Rosa had brought enough food to feed a small army, and Detective Morales had kept me updated on every development in the investigation. The forensics team had confirmed what Marcus suspected. The safety cables on the beam had been deliberately cut, and the timing mechanism on the crane had been tampered with to create a delayed release. Someone with inside knowledge of the equipment had orchestrated my accident with precision. But they needed more evidence to tie it directly to Rick. That's where I came in. The supply shed was exactly as isolated as I had expected. Rick followed me inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click. The small recording device Detective Morales had given me was hidden in my work vest pocket, already activated. "Maya, I want to talk to you about something important," Rick began, settling into the familiar pattern of false concern. "I've been thinking about what happened, about how we can prevent similar accidents in the future." "Oh." I kept my voice neutral, continuing to count inventory items like this was a normal conversation. "The thing is, accidents like this, they raise questions. Insurance companies start poking around, safety inspectors show up asking uncomfortable questions. It's not good for anyone, especially workers who might have been filing unnecessary complaints about perfectly normal construction practices." My pen stopped moving across the clipboard. "What do you mean by unnecessary complaints?" Rick moved closer, his voice dropping to that threatening tone I remembered from our previous conversation. "Maya, I know you've been keeping detailed records of what you think are safety violations. I also know you've been planning to present those records to the audit team next week." My blood ran cold, but I forced myself to keep writing. I document everything, Rick. It's part of being thorough. Thorough. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's one word for it. Another word might be vindictive, or maybe ungrateful. Here you are, working in an industry that doesn't usually welcome people like you, and instead of being thankful for the opportunity, you're looking for problems that don't exist. People like me? Women who don't know their place, who cause trouble for hardworking men just trying to do their jobs, who make up stories about harassment and safety violations because they can't handle the reality of construction work. The recording device was capturing every word, but I needed more. I needed him to admit to the sabotage directly. Rick, are you saying my accident wasn't really an accident? He studied my face carefully, probably looking for signs that I suspected something. I kept my expression confused and slightly hurt, like someone who genuinely didn't understand what was happening. I'm saying accidents happen to people who don't pay attention to their surroundings, people who are too busy looking for problems to focus on their own safety. Maybe this accident was a wake-up call, Maya. Maybe it's time for you to consider whether this job is really right for you. What if I don't want to leave? Rick's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw the cold calculation underneath. Well, that would be unfortunate, especially since I heard from HR that your emergency contacts didn't seem very concerned about your welfare. Makes a person wonder what would happen if there was another accident, a worse one maybe, whether anyone would even care enough to ask questions. There it was. Not a direct confession, but close enough to show his mindset. He'd counted on my family's abandonment as part of his plan. My parents aren't very involved in my life. Exactly, which is why I think you should seriously consider my suggestion about finding work that's better suited for your situation. Somewhere safer, where you won't have to worry about heavy equipment or workplace accidents. Rick reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. I have a friend who runs a temp agency. Clerical work, data entry, nice quiet office environment, much more appropriate for someone in your position. I took the card with hands that barely trembled. And if I'm not interested in office work, his smile turned genuinely cold. Maya, I think you misunderstood me. This isn't really a suggestion. It's more like a final offer. Take the office job or find out what happens to people who don't know when to quit. The door to the supply shed suddenly opened, and Marcus stepped in, his face grim. Maya, I need you to help me with the equipment manifest. Rick, the main office called. They want to see you in the trailer immediately. Rick straightened, his professional mask snapping back into place. Of course. Maya, think about what we discussed. I'll need an answer by tomorrow morning. After he left, Marcus looked at me with concern. Did you get what you needed? I pat the recording device in my pocket, every word.
He didn't confess directly to sabotaging the equipment, but he threatened me, admitted he knew about my family situation, and basically said I'd have another accident if I didn't quit. Marcus pulled out his phone. Detective Morales is waiting in the parking lot. She wants to hear the recording immediately, and then we're getting you out of here. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in the back of an unmarked police car while Detective Morales played back the recording. Her expression grew darker with each threatening word from Rick's mouth. This is good, Maya. Really good. Combined with the forensics evidence and the pattern of harassment you documented, we have enough to arrest him. What happens now? Now we make sure he can't hurt you or anyone else. I've got officers positioned around the site, and we're going to take Rick into custody as soon as he comes out of that trailer. Through the car window, I watched construction workers going about their normal routines, unaware that their site supervisor was about to be arrested for attempted murder. It felt surreal, like watching a movie about someone else's life. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, I hoped it might be from my parents, finally checking on me after 3 days of silence. Instead, it was from my brother, Danny. Maya, I've been trying to call you for days. Mom and Dad told me you were in the hospital, but said you didn't want visitors. I finally got the full story from someone named Marcus, who called me back. What the hell is going on? I'm driving down there right now. I stared at the message, feeling a mixture of relief and anger. Relief that Danny actually cared. Anger that it had taken this long for him to get the truth. Detective Morales noticed my expression. Bad news? No, I said, watching as police officers emerged from the construction trailer with Rick Paulson in handcuffs. Actually, I think it might be good news. For the first time in years. Rick saw me sitting in the police car as they walked him past. His face contorted with rage, and he started shouting something about vindictive women and false accusations. But his words couldn't touch me anymore. I had evidence, I had witnesses, and I had people who actually cared about my well-being. As the police car drove him away, Marcus appeared at my window. "How are you holding up, kiddo?" "Better than I expected," I said, and realized I meant it. "Marcus, I need to ask you something. Why did you fight so hard for me? Why did you stay at the hospital? Why did you call in favors? Why did you risk your job to help me expose Rick?" He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the construction site where we'd both spent so many hours. "You know, Maya, I've got 2 daughters. They're both smart, both tough, both capable of doing anything they set their minds to. And I realized that if something like this happened to one of them, I'd hope there would be someone like me who would stand up and fight for them." He turned back to me with a smile. "Besides, good workers are hard to find, and troublemakers who document safety violations, those are even rarer. We need people like you in this industry." Detective Morales closed her notebook. "Maya, Rick's going to be charged with attempted murder, workplace harassment, and tampering with safety equipment. With the evidence we have, he's looking at serious prison time. But I want you to know that the danger isn't completely over. He might make bail, and there could be retaliation from people who supported him." "What do you recommend?" "Stay alert, don't work alone, and trust the people who have already proven they're on your side." I looked at Marcus, who literally slept in a hospital chair to make sure I was safe. I thought about Rosa, who had treated me like a daughter when my own parents couldn't be bothered to visit. I thought about Detective Morales, who had taken my case seriously when others might have dismissed it as workplace drama. And I thought about the safety reports still saved on my laptop, the ones that could prevent other workers from being hurt the way Rick had tried to hurt me. "Detective, I want to testify. I want to make sure Rick pays for what he did, and I want to make sure my safety reports get to the right people so this never happens again." She smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." As I walked back toward the construction site, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call, not a text. Danny's name appeared on the screen. "Maya? Oh my God, I've been so worried. I'm about 2 hours away. Are you okay? Do you need anything? I can't believe Mom and Dad didn't tell me what really happened." For the first time in days, I felt tears prick at my eyes. But they weren't tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of relief. "I'm okay, Danny. Actually, I'm better than okay. I'm finally exactly where I'm supposed to be." The courtroom was packed with construction workers from 3 different sites, all wearing their cleanest work clothes and steel-toed boots that echoed against the marble floors. Marcus sat in the front row with Rosa, both of them nodding encouragingly every time I looked their way. Danny had driven down from Seattle and hadn't left my side for the past 2 weeks, making up for years of distance with fierce protective energy. When I took the stand, Rick's lawyer tried to paint me as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge through false accusations. But the recording spoke for itself, playing Rick's threats in his own voice for the entire courtroom to hear. The forensic evidence was undeniable, the safety violations were thoroughly documented, and witness after witness testified about Rick's pattern of harassment and intimidation. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts: attempted murder, workplace harassment, and tampering with safety equipment. The judge sentenced him to 12 years in prison with no possibility of parole for the first 5. But the real victory came afterward, in the hallway outside the courtroom, when the site safety inspector approached me with a job offer. The
The construction company was implementing a new position, site safety advocate, and they wanted someone with my experience and attention to detail to help prevent future incidents across all their projects. 6 months later, I walked through the same construction site where Rick had tried to end my career and possibly my life. The steel beams reached towards the sky just as they had before, but now I carried a clipboard filled with safety protocols instead of inventory lists. Workers approached me with concerns they never would have shared with Rick, knowing I would listen and take action rather than dismiss their worries. Marcus had been promoted to regional foreman, overseeing 5 different sites, but he still checked on me every day. Rosa still sent homemade soup whenever she thought I looked too thin. And Danny called every Sunday, sometimes talking for hours about everything we'd missed during those years of artificial distance created by parents who had never deserved either of us. As for my parents, they eventually reached out through a lawyer trying to reconcile after the story made local news. I declined their invitation to coffee. Some bridges, once burned by deliberate cruelty, aren't worth rebuilding. The people who matter, the ones who show up when you're lying in a hospital bed, those are the relationships worth investing in. Standing in the afternoon sunlight, watching workers use proper safety equipment and follow protocols that might save their lives, I realized Rick had been wrong about everything. I wasn't a troublemaker looking for problems that didn't exist. I was someone who refused to stay quiet when staying quiet meant other people could get hurt. The construction industry didn't need fewer people like me. It needed more.